Do you remember 6 years ago when Donald Trump was asked if he would accept the results of the 2016 presidential election? I do. He said, in no uncertain terms, very explicitly, he would only accept the results if he won. He said this with a smug smile on his face directly into the camera. Do you remember when, during that same election cycle, during a rally, he said that he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and not lose voters? I do. I remember he looked the camera right in the eye and said that with a smug smile on his face. Do you remember when Donald Trump was asked to publicly disavow the Proud Boys? He said, very explicitly, with a smug smile on his face, the Proud Boys should stand back and stand by. I remember. Do you remember after Charlottesville, when Donald Trump, with a smug smile on his face, said there were good people on both sides? Both sides, one of which being a group of very explicit neo-Nazis and neo-Confederates. You see, I remember all these things because outside of his words and his actions, I also remember the words and actions of his supporters. I remember hearing things like, oh, you're just overreacting, or you're taking his words out of context. Or my favorite one, oh, he's just joking. That's what he does. He's just, trying to rile you up, and it worked. Every single time. And every time I would always ask, okay, well, what's the context then? And this weird thing would happen. I'd get no response. I'd either get stonewalled, or the topic would change, or I'd be met with hostility. But I wouldn't get an actual response. I'd get a reaction. So I'd like to ask the same question. What's the context of Donald Trump saying that he'd be willing to terminate articles of, including the entirety of, the Constitution to get his way? What's the context there? I wonder. For the last 6 years, people like myself have been saying, this guy's a fascist. This guy's an authoritarian. This guy, if given the chance, will openly subvert and nullify the Constitution. And for 6 years, his supporters have, with one side of their mouth, said, oh, you're just taking it out of context, while on the other side of their mouth openly cheered this kind of rhetoric on. Donald Trump is a fascist. He's a fascist. Donald Trump is a fascist. This is what fascists do. This is what authoritarians do. He wants to be a dictator. He wants to be a god emperor. Because for somebody like Donald Trump, everything isn't enough. He'll always want more. He's a parasite. His followers, the ones who are willing to commit violence on his behalf, the ones who are willing to go to prison for him, at this point, are fascists. Fascism didn't just happen. It's not this sudden arrival in Europe in the 1930s and the 1940s. That's not how it worked. It was allowed in. People like to say that we're at a crossroad right now. No, we passed that crossroad in 2016. I'd even say that we passed that crossroad back in 2001, 2002 when we passed the Patriot Act. But we've already passed that crossroad. Now we are driving 70 miles per hour on the freeway into oncoming traffic. At what point are we going to stop letting these idiots drive? At what point do we take the wheel? When do we take the wheel? I, unfortunately, not smart enough to answer that question. What I can answer is this. Is Donald Trump a fascist? Yes. He has openly told us this for years. I can't say that I told you so, because he said it a lot louder than I ever could. So, what do we do? How do we take the wheel? 2024 rolls around. This man has already said he is going to run. Do not let him win. Republicans, if you love your party, do not let him win. Do not let him on the ticket. Democrats, if you love your country, do not let him win. Work with Republicans. Don't let him win. Everybody else, don't let him win. Protect the integrity of our elections. And I don't mean that in the weird racist dog whistle that Donald Trump means it in. I mean in places where in-person voting is a thing. Don't let people get intimidated. Show up. Vote. Encourage people to vote. Remind people what we are up against. Donald Trump has openly said that he is willing to terminate the Constitution to get his way. And his supporters have openly shown that they are willing to commit violence against the people that the Constitution protects, and more importantly than that, the people who the Constitution doesn't protect. So the last thing we can do, the next thing we can do, is keep pushing for constitutional protections for those in this country who do not have them yet. We the people means everyone. And finally, to MAGA Nation, you don't get to talk about how sacred the Constitution is anymore. You don't. I mean, you haven't really been able to for a while, but you do not get to talk about how sacred the Constitution is. If you still support Trump at this point, you are a fascist. I am not taking his words out of context. There is no context. You can't argue your way out of this. There is no context. There is only his words and his actions. You have a good night. Get some sleep. Stay hydrated. We've got a lot of work to do.